Sapiens by Yuval Harari. Part 1, The Cognitive Revolution. Chapter 1, An Animal of No Significance. About 13.5 billion years ago, matter, energy, time, and space came into being in what is known as the Big Bang. The story of these fundamental features of our universe is called physics. About 3 lakh years after their appearance, matter and energy started to coalesce into a complex structures called atom, which then combined into molecules. The story of atom, molecule, and their interaction is called chemistry. About 3.8 billion years ago, on a planet called Earth, certain molecules combined to form particularly large and intricate structures called organism. The story of organism is called biology. About 70,000 years ago, organisms belonging to species Homo sapiens started to form even more elaborate structures called cultures. The subsequent development of these human cultures is called history. 3 important revolutions shaped the course of history. The cognitive revolution kick-started history about 70,000 years ago. The agricultural revolution sped it up about 12,000 years ago. The scientific revolution, which got underway only 500 years ago, may well end history and start something completely different. This book tells us the story of how these 3 revolutions have affected humans and their fellow organisms. There were humans long before there was history. Animals, much like modern humans, first appeared about 2.5 million years ago. But for countless generations, they did not stand out from the myriad other organisms with which they shared their habitats. On a hike in East Africa 2 million years ago, you might well have encouraged a familiar cast of human characters, anxious mothers cuddling their babies and clutches of carefree children playing in the mud. Temperamental youths chafing against the diktats of society, and weary elders who just wanted to be left in the peace, chest-thumping machos trying to impress the local beauty, and wise old matriarchs who had already seen it all. The archaic human loved, played, formed close friendship, and competed for status and power. But so did chimpanzees, baboons, and elephant. There was nothing special about humans. Nobody, least of all humans themselves, had any inkling that their descendants would one day walk on the moon, split the atom, fathom the genetic code, and write history books. The most important thing to know about prehistoric humans is that they were insignificant animals with no more impact on their environment than gorillas, fireflies, or jellyfish. Biologists classify organisms into species. Animals are said to belong to the same species if they tend to mate with each other, giving birth to fertile offsprings. Horses and donkeys have a recent common ancestor and share many physical traits, but they show little sexual interest in one another. They will mate if induced to do so. But their offsprings, called mules, are sterile. Mutations in donkeys' DNA can therefore never cross over the horses, or vice versa. The 2 types of animals are consequently considered 2 distinct species moving along separate evolutionary paths. By contrast, a bulldog or a spaniel may look very different, but they are members of the same species, sharing the same DNA pool. They will happily mate, and their puppies will grow up to pair off with other dogs and produce more puppies. Species that evolved from a common ancestor that bunched together under the healing genus. Lions, tigers, leopard, and jaguars are different species within the genus Panthera. Biologists label organisms with 2-part Latin name genus followed by species. Lions, for example, are called Panthera leo, a species leo of the genus Panthera. Presumably, everyone reading this book is Homo sapien, the species sapien of the genus Homo. Genera in their turn are grouped into families such as the cats, the dogs, and the elephants. All members of a family trace their lineage back to a founding matriarch or patriarch. All cats, for example, from the smallest house kitten to the most ferocious lion, share a common feline ancestor who lived about 25 million years ago. Homo sapiens too belongs to a family, the banal fact used to be one of the history's most closely guarded secrets. Homo sapiens long preferred to view itself as set apart from animals, an orphan, bereft parents, but that's just not the case. Like it or not, we are the members of large and particularly noisy family called the Great Apes. Our closest living relatives includes chimpanzees, gorillas, and orang-utans. The chimpanzees are the closest. Just 6 million years ago, a single female ape had two daughters. One became the ancestor of all chimpanzees. The other is our grandmother. Skeletons in the closet. Homo sapiens had kept hidden an even more disturbing secret. Not only do we possess an abundance of uncivilized cousins, once upon a time we had quite a few brothers and sisters as well. We are used to thinking about ourselves as the only humans because for the last 10,000 years, our species has indeed been the only human species around. Yet, the real meaning of the word human is an animal belonging to the genus Homo, and there used to be many other species of this genus besides Homo sapiens. Moreover, as we long see in the last chapter of the book, in the not so distant future, we might again have to contend with non-sapient humans. To classify this point, I will often use the term sapiens to denote members of the species Homo sapiens, while reserving the term human to refer to all extant members of the genus Homo. Humans first evolved in East Africa about 2.5 million years ago from an early genus of apes called Australopithecus, which means southern ape, about 2 million years ago. Some of these archaic men and women left their homeland to journey through a settled vast areas of North America, Europe, and Asia, since survival in the snowy forest of northern Europe required different traits than those needed to stay alive in Indonesia's steaming jungles. Human population evolved in different directions. The result was several distinct species, to each of which scientists have assigned a pompous Latin name. Humans in Europe and Western Asia evolved into Homo neanderthalensis, man from the Neander Valley, popularly referred to simply as Neanderthals. Neanderthals, bulkier and more muscular than the sapiens, were well adapted to the cold climate of Ice Age Western Eurasia. The more eastern regions of Asia was populated by Homo erectus, upright man who survived there for close to 2 million years, making it the most durable human species ever. This record is unlikely to be broken even by our own species. It is doubtful whether Homo sapiens will still be around 1,000 years from now. So, 2 million years is really out of our league. On the island of Java in Indonesia lived Homo solensis, man from the Solo Valley, who was suited to life in tropics. On another Indonesian island, the small island of Flores, archaic humans underwent a process of dwarfing. Humans first reached Flores when the sea levels was exceptionally low and the island was easily accessible from the mainland. When the sea rose again, some people were trapped on the island, which was poor in resources. Big people who need a lot of food died first. Smaller fellows survived much better. Over the generations, the people of Flores became dwarfs. This unique species, called by the scientists as Homo florensis, reached a maximum height of only 1 meter and weighed no more than 25 kilograms. They were nevertheless able to produce stone tools and even managed occasionally to hunt down some of the island's elephants. Though, to be fair, the elephants were a dwarf species as well. In 2010, another lost sibling was rescued from oblivion when scientists excavating the Denisova cave in Siberia discovered a fossilized finger bone. Genetic analysis proved that the finger belonged to a previously unknown human species, which was named Homo Denisova. Who knows how many lost relatives of ours are waiting to be discovered into the caves or other islands and in other climes. While these humans were evolving in Europe and Asia, evolution in East Africa did not stop. The cradle of humanity continued to nurture numerous new species such as Homo rudolfensis, man from Lake Rudolph, Homo ergaster, working man, and eventually our own species, which we have immodestly named Homo sapiens, the wise man. The members of some of these species were massive and others were dwarfs. Some were fearsome hunters and others meek plant gatherers. Some lived only on a single island while some roamed over continents. But all of them belonged to genus Homo. They were all human beings. It's common fallacy to envision these species as arranged in straight line of descent, with ergaster begetting erectus, erectus begetting the Neanderthals, and Neanderthals evolving into us. This linear model gives the mistaken impression that at any particular moment, only one type of human inhabited the earth and that all earlier species were merely older models of ourselves. The truth is that from about 2 million years ago until around 10,000 years ago, the world was home at one and the same time to several human species. And why not? Today, there are many species of foxes, bears, and pigs. The earth of 100 millennia ago was walked by the least 6 different species of man. It's our current exclusivity, not the multi-species past, that is peculiar and perhaps incriminating. As we will shortly see, we sapiens have good reason to repress the memory of our siblings. Now, the cost of thinking. Despite their many differences, all human species share several defining characteristics. Most notably, humans have extraordinarily large brains compared to other animals. Mammals weighing 60 kilograms have an average brain size of 200 cubic centimeters. The earliest men and women, 2.5 million years ago, had brains of about 600 cubic centimeters. Modern sapiens sport a brain averaging 1200 to 1400 cubic centimeters. Neanderthals' brain were even bigger. That evolution should select for larger brains may seem to us like, well, a no-brainer. We are so enamored of our high intelligence that we assume that when it comes to cerebral power, most must be better. But if that were the case, the feline family would also have produced cats who would do calculus, and frogs would by now have launched their own space programs. Why are giant brains so rare in the animal kingdom? The fact is that a jumbo brain is a jumbo drain on the body. It's not easy to carry around, especially when encased inside a massive skull. It's even harder to fuel. In Homo sapiens, the brain accounts for about 2 to 3% of the total body weight, but it consumes 25% of the body's energy when the body is at rest. By comparison, the brain of older apes require only 8% of rest time energy. Archaic humans paid for their large brains in 2 ways. Firstly, they spent more time in search of food, and secondly, their muscles atrophied. Like a government diverting money from defense to education, humans diverted energy from biceps to neurons. It's hardly a foregone conclusion that this is a good strategy for survival on savannas. A chimpanzee can't win an argument with Homo sapiens, but the ape can rip the man apart like a rag doll. Today, our big brain pay off nicely because we can produce cars, guns that enable us to move much faster than chimps and shoot them from a safe distance instead of wrestling. But cars and guns are the recent phenomena. For more than 2 million years, humans' neural network kept growing and growing, but apart from some flint knives and pointed sticks, humans had precious little to show for it. What then drove forward the evolution for a massive human brain during those 2 million years? Frankly, we don't know. Another singular human trait is that we walk upright on 2 legs. Standing up, it's easier to scan the savannas for the game or enemies, and the arms that are necessary for locomotion are freed from other purposes like throwing stones or signaling. The more things these hands could do, the more successful their owners were. So evolutionary pressure brought about an increasing concentration of nerves and finely tuned muscles in the palms and fingers. As a result, humans can perform even very intricate tasks with their hand. In particular, they can produce and use sophisticated tools. The first evidence of tool production dates from about 2.5 million years ago, and the manufacture and the use of tools are the criteria by which archaeologists recognize ancient humans. Yet, walking upright has a downside. The skeleton of our primate ancestor developed from millions of years to support a creature that walked on all 4, and had a relatively small head. Adjusting to that upright position was quite a challenge, especially when the scaffolding had to support an extra large cranium. Humankind paid for its lofty vision and industrious hands with backaches and stiff necks. Women paid extra. An upright gait required narrower hips, constructing the birth canal. And this just when babies' heads were getting bigger and bigger. Death in childbirth became a major hazard for human females. Women who gave birth earlier were when the infant's brain and head were still relatively small and supple, fed better, and lived to have more children. Natural selection consequently favored earlier births, and indeed, compared to other animals, humans are born prematurely when many of their vital systems are still underdeveloped. A colt can trot shortly after birth. A kitten leaves its mother to forage in its own when it is just a few weeks old. Human babies are helpless, dependent for many years on their elders for sustenance, protection, and education. This fact has contributed greatly to both to humankind's extraordinary social abilities and to its unique social problems. Lone mothers could hardly forage enough food for their offsprings and themselves with needy children in tow. Raising children required constant help from other family members and neighbors. It takes a tribe to raise a human. Evolution thus favored those capable of forming strong social ties. In addition, since humans are born underdeveloped, they can be educated and socialized to a far greater extent than any other animal. Most mammals emerge from the womb like glazed earthenware emerging from a kiln. Any attempt to remolding will only scratch or break them. Humans emerge from womb like molten glass from the furnace. They can be spun, stretched, and shaped with a surprising degree of freedom. This is why today we can educate our children to become Christian or Buddhists, capitalists or socialists, warlike or peace-loving. We assume that a large brain, the use of tools, superior learning abilities, and complex social structures are huge advantage. It seems self-evident that these have made humankind the most powerful animal on earth. But humans enjoyed all of these advantages for a full 2 million years, during which they remained weak and marginal creatures. Thus, humans who lived a million years ago, despite their big brains and sharp stone tools, dwelt in constant fear of predators, rarely hunted large games, and subsisted mainly by gathering plants, scooping up insects, stalking small animals, and eating the carrion left behind by other powerful carnivores. One of the most common uses of early stone tools was to crack open bones in order to get the marrow. Some researchers believe this was our original niche, just as woodpeckers specializes in extracting insects from the trunks of trees. The first humans specialized in extracting marrow from bones. Why marrow? Well, suppose you observe a pride of lions take down and devour a giraffe. You wait patiently until they are done, but still not your turn, because first the hyenas and jackals, and you don't dare interfere with them, scavenge the leftover. Only then you and your band dare approach the carcass. Look cautiously left and right and dig into the edible tissue that remained. This is a key to understanding our history and psychology. Genus Homo's position in the food chain was, until quite recently, in the middle. For millions of years, humans hunted smaller creatures and gathered what they could, all the while being hunted by larger predators. It was only 400,000 years ago that several species of man began to hunt large game on a regular basis, and only in the last 100,000 years, with the rise of Homo sapiens, that man jumped to the top of the food chain. That spectacular leap from the middle to the top has enormous consequences. Other animals at the top of the pyramid, such as lions and sharks, evolved into that position very gradually, over millions of years. This enables the ecosystem to develop checks and balances that prevent lions and sharks from wreaking too much havoc. As lions became deadlier, so gazelles evolved to run faster, hyenas to cooperate better, and rhinoceros to be more bad-tempered. In contrast, humankind ascended to the top so quickly that the ecosystem was not given time to adjust. Moreover, humans themselves failed to adjust. Most top predators of the planets are majestic creatures. Millions of years of dominion have filled them with self confidence. Sapiens, by contrast, is more like Banana Republic dictator, having so recently been of the underdogs of the savannas. We are full of fear and anxieties over our position, which makes us doubly cruel and dangerous. Many historical calamities, from deadly wars to ecological catastrophes, have resulted from this over hasty jump. Now, a race of cooks. A significant step on the way to the top was domestication of fire. Some human species may have made occasional use of fire as early as 800,000 years ago. About 300,000 years ago, Homo erectus, Neanderthals, and the forefathers of Homo sapiens were using fire on a daily basis. Humans now had a dependable source of light and warmth and a deadly weapon against prowling lions. Not long afterwards, humans may even have started deliberately to torch their neighborhoods. A carefully managed fire could turn impassable barren thickets into prime grasslands teeming with game. In addition, once the fire died down, Stone Age entrepreneurs could walk through the smoking remains and harvest charcoaled animals, nuts, and tubers. But the best thing fire did was cook. Food that humans cannot digest in the natural forms, such as wheat, rice, and potatoes, became staples of our diet. Thanks to cooking, fire not only changed food chemistry, it changed its biology as well. Cooking killed germs and parasites that infested food. Humans also had a far easier time chewing and digesting old favorites such as fruits, nuts, insects, carrion if they were cooked, whereas chimpanzees spent 5 hours a day chewing raw food. A single hour suffices for people eating cooked food. Now, the advent of cooking enabled humans to eat more kinds of food, to devote less time to eating, and to make do with smaller teeth and shorter intestines. Some scholars believe there is a direct link between the advent of cooking, the shortening of humans' intestinal tract, and the growth of human brain. Since long intestines and large brains are both massive energy consumers, it's hard to have both. By shortening the intestines and decreasing their energy consumption, cooking inadvertently opened the way to jumbo brains of Neanderthals and Sapiens. Fire also opened the first significant gulf between man and other animals. The power of almost all animals depends on their bodies, the strength of their muscles and the size of their teeth, the breadth of their wings. Though they may harness winds and currents, they are unable to control these natural forces and are always constrained by their physical design. Eagles, for example, identify thermal columns rising from the ground, spread their giant wings, and allow the hot air to lift them upwards. Yet, eagle cannot control the location of the columns, and their maximum carrying capacity is strictly proportional to their wingspan. Now, when humans domesticated fire, they gained control of an obedient and potentially limitless force. Unlike eagles, humans could choose when and where to ignite a flame, and they were able to exploit fire for any number of tasks. Most importantly, the power of fire was not limited by the form, structure, or strength of the human body. A single woman with a flint or fire stick could burn down the entire forest in a matter of hours. The domestication of fire was a sign of things to come. Coming to our brothers keepers. Despite the benefits of fire, around 150,000 years ago, humans were still marginal creatures. They could now scare away lions, warm themselves during cold nights, and burn down the occasional forests. Yet, counting all species together, there were still no more than perhaps 1 million humans living between the Indonesia archipelago and Iberian Peninsula, a mere blip on ecological radar. Our own species, Homo sapiens, was already present in the world stage. But so far, it was just dwindling in our business in a corner of Africa. We don't know exactly where and when animals that can be classified as Homo sapiens first evolved from some earlier type of humans. But most scientists agree by around 150,000 years ago, East Africa was populated by sapiens that looked just like us. If one of them turned up in a modern morgue, the local pathologist would notice nothing in peculiar. thanks to the blessing of fire. They had smaller teeth and jaws that their ancestors, whereas they had massive brains equal in size to ours. Scientists also agree that about 70,000 years ago, sapiens from East Africa spread into the Arabian Peninsula and from there quickly over the entire Eurasian landmass. When Homo sapiens landed in Arabia, most of the Eurasia was already settled by other humans. What happened to them? There are two conflicting theories. The interbreeding theory tells a story of attraction, sex, and mingling. As the African immigrants spread around the world, they bred with other human population and people today are the outcomes of this interbreeding. For example, when sapiens reached Middle East and Europe, they encountered the Neanderthals. These humans were more muscular than sapiens, had larger brains, and were better adapted to cold climes. They used tools and fires, were good hunters, and apparently took care of their sick and infirm. Archaeologists have discovered the bones of Neanderthals who lived for many years with several physical handicaps, evidence that they were cared by their relatives. Neanderthals are often depicted in caricatures as archetypical brutish and stupid cave people, but recent evidence has changed their image. According to the interbreeding theory, when sapiens spread into Neanderthal land, sapiens bred with Neanderthals until the two populations merged. If this is the case, then today's Eurasians are not pure sapiens. They are a mixture of sapiens and Neanderthals. Similarly, when sapiens reached East Asia, they interbred with local erectus, so the Chinese and the Koreans are a mixture of sapiens and erectus. The opposing view, called the replacement theory, tells a very different story, one of incompatibility, revulsion, and perhaps even genocide. According to this theory, sapiens and other humans had different anatomies and some likely different mating habits and even body odors. They would have little sexual interest in one another, and even if Neanderthals Romeo and sapiens Juliet fell in love, they could not produce fertile children because the genetic gulf separating the two populations were already unbridgeable. The two populations remained completely distinct, and when Neanderthals died out or were killed off, their genes died with them. According to this view, sapiens replaced all the previous human populations without merging with them. If that is the case, the lineages of the contemporary humans can be traced back exclusively to East Africa around 70,000 years ago. We are all pure sapiens. A lot hinges on this debate. From an evolutionary perspective, 70,000 years is a relatively short interval. If the replacement theory is correct, all the living humans have roughly the same genetic baggage and the racial distinctions among them are negligible. But if the interbreeding theory is right, there might be, a genetic difference between Africans, Europeans, Asians than go back hundreds of thousands of years ago. This is political dynamite, which could provide material for explosive racial theories. In recent decades, the replacement theory has been common wisdom in the field. It has firmer archaeological backing and was more politically correct. Scientists had no desire to open up the Pandora's box of racism by claiming significant genetic diversity among modern human population. But that ended in 2010 when the result 4-year effort to map the Neanderthals' genomes were published. Geneticists were able to collect enough intact Neanderthal DNA from fossils to make a broad comparison between it and the DNA of contemporary humans. The results stunned the scientific community. It turned out that around 1 to 4% of the unique human DNA of the modern populations in the Middle East and Europe is Neanderthals' DNA. That's not a huge amount, but it's significant. A second shock came after several months later, when DNA extracted from the fossilized finger of Denisova was mapped. The results proved that up to 6% of the unique human DNA of modern Melanesians and Aboriginal Australians is Denisovan DNA. If these results are valid, and it's important to keep in mind that further research is underway and may either reinforce or modify these conclusions. The interbreeder got at least some things right, but that does not mean that the replacement theory is completely wrong. Since Neanderthals and Denisovans contributed only a small amount of DNA to our present-day genome, it is possible to speak of merger between sapiens and other human species, although differences between them were not large enough to completely prevent fertile intercourse. They were sufficient to make such contrasts very rare. How then should we understand the biological relatedness of the sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans. Clearly, they were not completely different species like horses and donkeys. On the other hand, they were not just different populations of the same species like bulldogs and Spaniels. Biological reality is not black and white. There are also important gray areas. Every two species that evolved from the common ancestors, such as horses and donkeys, were at some point just two populations of the same species, like bulldogs and spaniels. They must have been a point when the two populations were already quite different from one another, but still capable on rare occasions of having sex and producing fertile offspring. Then another mutation served this last connecting thread, and they went their separate evolutionary ways. It seems that about 50,000 years ago, sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans were at the borderline point. They were almost, but not quite entirely separate species. As we shall see in the next chapter, sapiens were already very different from Neanderthals and Denisovans, not only in their genetic code and physical traits, but also in their cognitive and social abilities. Yet it appears it was still just possible on rare occasions for a sapien or a Neanderthals to produce a fertile offspring. So the population did not merge, but a few lucky Neanderthal genes did hitch a ride on the Sapien Express. It is unsettling and perhaps thrilling to think that we sapiens could at one point have sex with an animal from a different species and produced children together. But if the Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other human species didn't merge with sapiens, why did they vanish? One possibility is that Homo sapiens drove them to extinction. Imagine a sapien band reaching a Balkan valley where Neanderthals has lived for hundreds and thousands of years. The newcomers began to hunt deer and gather the nuts and berries that were Neanderthals' traditional staples. Sapiens were more proficient hunters and gatherers, thanks to better technology and superior social skills. So they multiplied and spread. The less resourceful Neanderthals found is increasingly difficult to feed themselves. Their population dwindled and they slowly died out, except perhaps for one or two members who joined their sapiens neighborhood. Another possibility is that competition for resources flared up into violence and genocide. Tolerance is not a sapien trademark. In modern times, a small difference in skin color, dialect, or religion has been enough to prompt one group of sapiens to set about exterminating another group. Would ancient sapiens have been more tolerant towards the entirely different human species? It may well be that when sapiens encountered Neanderthals, the result was first and the most significant ethnic cleansing campaign in history. Whichever way it happened, the Neanderthals pose one of history's great what-ifs. Imagine how things might have turned out had the Neanderthals and Denisovans survived alongside Homo sapiens. What kind of cultures, societies, and political structures would have emerged in the world when several different human species coexisted? How, for example, would religion, faith have unfolded? Would the book of Genesis have declared that Neanderthals descend from Adam and Eve? Would Jesus have died for the sins of the Denisovans? And would the Quran have reserved seats in heaven for the righteous humans? Whatever their species, would Neanderthals have been able to serve in the Roman legions or in the sprawling bureaucracy of Imperial China? Would the American Declaration of Independence as a self-evident truth that all members of the genus Homo are created equal? Would Karl Marx have urged workers of all species to unite? Over the past 10,000 years, Homo sapiens have grown so accustomed to being the only human species that it's hard for us to conceive of any possibility. A lack of brothers and sisters make it easier to imagine that we are the epitome of creation and the chasm separates us from the rest of animal kingdom. When Charles Darwin indicated that Homo sapiens was just another kind of animal, people were outraged. Even today, many refuse to believe it. Had the Neanderthals survived, would we still imagine ourselves to be a creature apart? Perhaps this is exactly why our ancestors wiped out the Neanderthals. They were too familiar to ignore, but too different to tolerate. When sapiens are to blame or not, no sooner had they arrived at the new location and then native population became extinct. The last remains of Homo solensis are dated to about 50,000 years ago. Homo Denisova disappeared shortly thereafter. Neanderthals made their exit roughly around 30,000 years ago. The last dwarf-like humans vanished from Flores Island about 12,000 years ago. They left behind some bones, stone tools, and few genes in our DNA, and a lot of unanswered questions. They also left behind us Homo sapiens, the last human species. What was the sapiens' secret of success? How did we manage to settle so rapidly in so many distant and ecologically different habitats? How did we push all the other human species into oblivion? Why could not even the strong, brainy, cold-proof Neanderthals survive our onslaught? The debate continues on rage. The most likely answer is the very thing that makes the debate possible. Homo sapiens conquered the world, thanks above all to its unique language.